That's why I'm here. I'm like,
Oh,
how are
it's
those
so
two things
beautiful
connected?
though in
Yeah,
Oxford. So good.
it's lovely.
Yeah. Oh, we're live. Sorry, everyone. We're just talking
It's
about my
okay. Come on
Oxford
in,
year and
everyone.
crying and, as you
Yeah,
do. Yeah.
as you do.
Yes. So, hello, everybody, and welcome. I hope you're all well on this very rainy but lovely day in America, apparently.
Well, in my little corner of America,
Yes.
yes, lovely.
So I'm Nicola from Listening Books, an audiobook lending charity for those who have a barrier to traditional print books. And welcome to the latest author and narrator special Q&A with one of the most popular narrators to date, with you narrating over 700 audiobooks, which is crazy. And also author of My Oxford Year. And thank you for listening, Julia Whelan. How are you doing today?
Hi, hello. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. So remember, if you've got any questions for Julia, just drop them in the live chat. And we'll get around to asking those a little later on. So, yeah, just jumping straight into narration. You've narrated obviously over 700 audiobooks now, which is an incredible number. When did you first realize that narration was not just like a job for you, but like a craft you really wanted to master?
That's a really good question because I was a child actor originally, and then I left the business and I went to school for English and creative writing. And I graduated in 2008, kind of right into a recession with this pretty useless child actor background and this pretty useless creative writing degree. And a friend of mine, who I'd actually been at Oxford with, her mother was an audiobook producer and director, and she's the one who I think took pity on me and said, "You might would you like some money?" Like she was like, "You might be very good at this career," and so it started out with I sent her a demo. I got a couple of books, and then it slowly started to kind of escalate and snowball, and I just loved it from the beginning. And you're right to ask the craft question because it's not like any other type of performance. So there's a learning curve where you can really only learn by doing. And I just had to kind of get my feet wet and figure out how to do it. But I was so in love with the work from the beginning. And I'd say within about 4 years, it was my full-time job, and it just kind of happened. I didn't actively go out and say, I want this as a career. Um, it just happened, and then I looked up and was like, actually, I love this. I love the way my life is because of this job, so I want to keep going.
Definitely. And audiobook narrators often shape a listener's entire listening
Hmm.
experience, yet their contributions aren't always fully recognised. What would you love listeners to like better understand or appreciate from the role of narrator?
I don't think people understand how much work goes into it. I think there's a sense of I just sit down and I read the book to you, but there's a prep read that goes on ahead of time where I'm keeping a character list of all of the different characters and any vocal description that the author has given them. I'm also keeping a word list that often needs research or at least asking the author what they intended, especially in a book like a fantasy series or something where everything is made up. And then when I get in the booth, it's about a 2-to-1 recording ratio to finished hours. So all told, there's about 4 hours of work that goes into every 1 hour of audio that you listen to, which is why doing like 70 books a year is actually a massive, massive undertaking. And that's why I pulled back. I don't do that anymore. I wanted more time to write. The work is just better when I'm doing fewer titles. So there's a lot that goes into it, not just in terms of also protecting my voice and being good to my voice and being able to sustain doing this job. But it's such an invisible job for the most part. There's most people don't know what their favorite narrators look like. Some people don't even pay attention to narrator names until they start seeing like I've heard this voice before,
Yeah.
and they start tracking who is this person. But so it's a very anonymous job, but it takes a lot of work to do and to do well.
Definitely. And could you walk us through like your typical preparation process before recording any audiobook and how you approach creating a voice for obviously there's various characters throughout the production as well?
Sure. So once I kind of have that prep read done, and I'm also getting I'm getting a sense of the tone of the voice of the book, not just the characters, but also the kind of authorial voice and what type of book is this? What's the feeling I need to create? I'm looking at that character list that I created, and I start with kind of the main core group of characters, like the ones that are always in conversation with each other, and start building from there so that I can differentiate those characters for the listener. And I think of it kind of like I have a repertory theater company in my head where I'm just like casting certain characters, certain people in certain roles. Um, and depending on the book, a lot of collaboration with the author or the producer or something like that. But if there's any accent work that I need to do or any kind of sharpening of certain skills in order to perform, then that all happens before I get in the booth.
Yeah. And do you have any favorite accents you've done before, or ones you totally just don't want to try?
Well, you know, it's funny. I hate to see Australian coming. Every time I get an Australian accent in a book, I just kind of white knuckle my way through it. It's not for some reason it's just very hard for me. Um, and but I can I can do it. Regional American is obviously very easy and very fun. I do a lot of British accents. And mostly RP. I don't have one of those mimic brains where I'm like, you know, oh, that's this particular village, but then if you go 5 miles north, you have that. I can't. Your accent system kind of eludes me. But I definitely I love learning accents, so when I have the time and something is new, being able to really learn how the differences, like what differentiates, for instance, Italian from Spanish or something, is actually a thing I had to do recently. And I'd never really drilled down on it before. Like it was something I could understand from travel. Like I can pick out where people are from, but I had never, as an actor, been like, actually, what is the mouth placement? What is the diphthong change? How rolled are those R's? You know, finding that kind of difference is very, very interesting to me.
Yeah, and definitely how you approach obviously male from female voices as well, because I know you've previously spoken about doing the sexy male voice.
In my world,
Yeah.
I do a lot of romance, and that is very important.
Yeah. And we just had a question come in as well from Lisa, who just said, I'd just like to tell you how much I appreciate how you differentiate different characters with your voice without
Thank
making
you.
any of them sound overdone at all, which is lovely.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate that. That's something that I think again in that like you can't you have to learn this job by doing it. It's very hard sometimes to know how far is too far and to all keep it kind of in the same tone of the piece, even though you may have a more outlandish character than another one. And so I really appreciate that. That's a very detailed compliment. Thank you.
And we had another one sent in previously that is from Lisa Gibbs. So thank you very much, Lisa. She asked, I would love to know, how do you get into character for each individual book now that you have narrated so many? And how do you keep those characters or books separate in your mind? It's a great question.
That is a great question. So I think I'd never mean to be glib when I answer a question like this, when I say it's just an acting job. And I know that's hard, but like in a half an hour, I can't, I can't
Dive into
explain
it.
acting, but I think it's so innate and intuitive at this point because I've been doing it for so long that I just kind of, it's not even an intellectual process at this point. It's just feeling a sense of character and kind of immediately knowing how I want to portray them. Some are more difficult, especially I think I take into account in a book the specific arc of the character in a book. So how I maybe if there's a way to differentiate their characterization or their voice at the beginning so that we have room to show that growth and that change in their voice by the end. I'm always thinking about that. I'm really thinking about how best to craft the story for the listener, and that's where it's different from an acting job, because an acting job normally you're just responsible for your one character, and in audiobooks I feel like it's actually more of a director
Mm.
impulse, like someone who has the vision for the whole thing. And again, finding the ways to play characters off of each other to create the dynamic that's necessary for the book is really the job.
Yeah, especially when you're like on your own in the booth, that must be so difficult because like with a cast, you can obviously bounce off each other, but
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because in acting, we just, the very basic level of acting is listen and respond. And I'm doing that with myself.
yeah,
And sometimes, I mean, I got into a flow recently where when I'm really just like in it, I can go pages without stopping, just talking to myself back and forth. And I was like, wow, this really is, it feels organic. Like it feels like I don't necessarily know how I'm going to say a certain thing, and therefore I don't necessarily know how I'm going to respond to that certain thing. Um, and what a trip. Like that is truly that's voices inside your head level.
yeah.
Like interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So you've narrated everything from like thrillers to romance to literary fiction. How do you adapt your performance style for different genres? Do you at all, or yeah?
I do. I think that's where the voice of the piece comes in. So when it's literary fiction, I will tend to not be so performance driven, like a little bit more back foot in the narrative voice generally, unless it's a very voicey first person
Mm,
literary thing, in which case it's a character study. And I think that that makes a difference too. First person versus third person is probably actually more of a determinant than genre. Um, some narrative voice, it's just getting you from point A to point B, and some narrative voice is an entirely new, like a totally different character. So it just has to do with reading the tone of the book, and I think also not just because of that was my studies in college, but I also just think as a writer, I have maybe a particularly attuned sensibility to understanding what an author is going for. Like, what are they trying to do here? What tone are they trying to create? How can I translate that for the listener who's not reading it on the page, but I want to give them the same experience they would have as if they were reading it?
yeah, definitely. And we just had a question in from Alex Morgan. Thank you very much, Alex. They asked, "What's the hardest character you've played from a book before?"
Oh, that's a great question. I Okay, so two things immediately popped into my mind. One is in V.E. Schwab's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. What was challenging and incredibly fun about that character was figuring out how to age her over the course of 300 years. She's
Wow.
immortal, right? And she starts out a provincial French country girl. And then by the time we catch up with her in 2014, she's living in Brooklyn and has a very, very faint French accent. And kind of finding those turns in her life and in her experience to watch that accent disappear. And also her voice. Like she's still a 24-year-old girl, but she has lived 3 centuries of experience. And what does that do to a voice? So that was one. And the other one is actually a very special project to me. It was Cormac McCarthy's final book called Stella Maris. And what's special about the book, I think, especially in audio, is that it's actually written as transcripts
Right.
between a psychiatrist in a mental institution and the woman who has checked herself in and is a math prodigy, violin prodigy, who also happens to be in love with her brother. And we recorded it in duet with, so it's Eduardo Ballerini and me, and we were in studio together recording it because it's just dialogue. So it's like a radio play, and it's so special. And that character of Alicia, her as a character is the most complicated thing I've ever played on camera in books of my career, period.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And was it easier though having someone in the studio
It
with
was. I
you?
mean, it felt like
Yeah.
acting. It was, we were like, we
Mm.
could be doing this as a play, I mean, it had that sense to it. So it was very much, I felt like I was back to my roots, kind of.
Yeah, definitely. We've had another question in from Jane. Thank you everyone for all your
Yeah,
questions.
thank you.
Do you have to read a book several times before choosing the characters' voices?
Usually not several times, definitely one with that close read that I'm talking about where I'm
Mm,
keeping track of things as I go along. And then sometimes individual sections, like I go back and I look at books with either whether it's tricky character stuff or just something that I'm like, how do I want to handle this particular passage? So at least once, I think the most I've ever read was probably Stella Maris, because there's also just so much math and science in that book, and I kind of had to go to math camp
Oh
to
no.
understand what she was even talking about. So there were a lot of sections of that book that I revisited multiple times in preparing the performance
Yeah,
for.
definitely. And I guess when you're talking about fantasy as well, when they come up, names of places and people, how do you? I guess that's a dialogue with the author.
It is. I mean, and often the kind of most disillusioning part of this process, and I know understand this as an author, is asking authors questions and having them go, "Oh, I don't know." It's like you write a name or something of an elf with 14 vowels and 3 apostrophes, and I'm like, "Tell me how you want me to say that," and they're like, "I don't know."
Oh, the
um,
pressure.
I know, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't. This was
Mm,
in your head." So it's yeah, there's building those worlds are also difficult. There's a series that I do that was a YA series called The Black Witch, and it's kind of a like different species and races that come together at like an Oxford kind of a fantasy Oxford, where they have to interact with each other for the first time. And it's a really, really beautiful series. But over the course of those 5 books, which are they're so long, and I keep to a previous question about how I keep them straight. I actually in my booth have character clips, audio samples of all different characters when I'm doing a series. So for the Black Witch series, I think I'm up to 200 different specific characters that I've kept over 7 years of doing these
mm.
books, because to that question's point, if there's a year between books and I've done 30 books since then, I have to have that kind of reminder of just listening to myself. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a couple more come in, but I'd love to ask myself as well. I was a big fan of Atmosphere. That was such an emotional book. How did you not cry when you were reading that
Who
aloud?
says I didn't? I was
Oh,
crying all over the
okay.
place. No, I mean, look, generally with emotion, there are some authors. Taylor always does that to me, but Kristin
Yeah.
Hanna also does that to me, where their books can be so emotional that I need to just keep taking breaks. Like I'll get through a couple sentences and then have to just crack the door to the booth, get up, walk around, come back to it. It's my job. Again, this goes back to an acting idiom that it's not my job to cry, it's to make you cry.
Mm,
So when I start finding myself personally affected, I have to be very careful that I don't want it to lead you in some way. The catharsis is for you to have, not for me. I've already had that as a reader when I prepped the book.
mm.
So something like Atmosphere, oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, the last 10 minutes of Atmosphere is
Okay.
grueling, and I just keep getting I get messages every day about that, the last 10 minutes. In fact, I just saw the author this weekend, and we were with a group of friends, and she was like, "Has everyone here listened to the last 10 minutes of Atmosphere?" She's like, "I'm going to play it because
Why did
and
she
I was
do
like,
that?
I know, I was
Going
like, so
through.
we all get to experience this again.
Yeah,
But I love those scenes. You just have to be, they are hair trigger though. You've got to be careful that I can't be too affected.
definitely. And as you said, the last 10 minutes absolutely broke me, but also in a good way. So thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Yeah. Lisa also said atmosphere was incredible. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
But yes, Lisa also asked, do you have any authors whose books you personally enjoy that you can't wait for the next book to come out? So you can not only do the narration, but also read it yourself.
Yes, Taylor's definitely in that. I mean, I've done all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. I've done all except I think one of Emily Henry's books.
So good.
And I will always be looking, I'm always asking, Em what she's working on and when I get to read it. It's every time I finish recording an Emily Henry book, I have the same response everyone else has, which is I have to wait another year.
Yes. Yeah.
um, and Yeah, I mean, there's a number of authors. I think those are the two I work for most consistently. But there are a number of authors who, when I see their name come through in an email that's an offer from a producer or a publisher, I jump through my computer screen to say yes to. I want to read it just as much as you do.
Definitely. And Jane said, do you have time to read for your own pleasure as well?
Thanks,
Not
Jane.
enough.
I
Yeah.
don't. Here's so a couple of years ago, I started my own audio publishing company called Audiobrary because um, there's something that's deeply broken in audio publishing, which is just how the money works. I love this job and I will keep doing it as long as I can do it, but narrators don't get royalties when everyone else in the publishing process does, and so it's not a sustainable career long term, and I do all of these popular books and I don't get anything for that except for my original session fee. And so I started a publishing company in order to fix that. We give narrators royalties. And as a result of that, I was already reading too much, but now I've got people submitting books to me for us to do. And I have probably 30 book deep queue at this point that I am just committed to getting through, and I owe people feedback. And so I have not read a book for pleasure in, oh gosh, at least 5 years.
Oh, no. Hopefully
Yeah.
there's a holiday coming up,
There's
maybe.
no holiday when you're running your own
No.
company. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Oh,
So, yeah, yeah.
no. But talking about books, you've obviously written your own books with My Oxford Year and others. Is there anything in the horizon on that?
Yeah, yes, I have been so my third book, which came out as an audio only. We started just I actually it's the book within a book from my second book, which is Thank You for Listening, which is about two audiobook narrators who fall in love while recording a romance novel. And that romance novel that they're recording, a lot of fans said I want to read it. And I said I'll do you one better. I'll have you listen to it. So I did it as an audio original. And that has actually just recently been picked up by a publisher for print. So that's going to come out in next spring, about a year from now. And I am currently working on the next book. I know what it is. I'm starting to outline. Um, but again, with managing my narration career, my author career, and now running this company, I'm I'm I want someone to figure out how to invent hours
Yes.
in the day. That would be great.
Yeah. Or maybe clients, that would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there any particular audiobooks that you love or that you'd recommend to our members at all to check out?
So I always recommend I mean, I feel like everyone here is a pretty committed audiobook listener, but so then you can take this advice to other people, but as a gateway audiobook for people who are maybe curious about it, I always recommend Daisy Jones and the Six because of it's a fake oral history, right? So it sounds kind of like a podcast. It's just really suited to audio. My personal favorite audiobook ever is Beautiful Ruins by Jess Walter and narrated by the amazing Eduardo Ballerini. And that book was the first time I listened to an audiobook and felt like a fan, could just divorce myself from the process of how it happens and just went, oh, this is why people love this. So yeah, I would recommend those two.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So what would you say the most rewarding part of knowing listeners choose to spend hours with you narrating audiobooks?
It's that is something that I feel very, very privileged to have experienced. There's something incredibly intimate about this job and about this relationship. Just the human voice in general is so fundamental and elemental and primitive to who we are as beings. I think, it's as close as we get to going back to telling stories around a campfire. And the I don't take that for granted, and I think that's why I'm very picky about what I record as well. Um, and it's different from being on people's tellies and, having them recognize you on the street and having that kind of that career where there's like a distance or a remove. This is just so I'm in your head. I get that. I get that that's the relationship. And so I take it very seriously.
Definitely, yeah. And is there a particular audiobook that you're especially proud of, or one that you feel like was like a turning point in your career?
There's a few turning point books, mostly because of the book. I mean, I think Gone Girl is probably the biggest like first turning point of my career. Um, Addie LaRue was, to be fair, another one. The Kristin Hanna books. but in terms of books that I'm incredibly proud of the performance, where I feel like even if people didn't necessarily, it wasn't the most popular book, but it was a turning point for me. Actually, one of them, because it's just these little challenges I set for myself. So one of them was People We Meet on Vacation
Oh,
by Emily
nice.
Henry, and
Yeah.
or I'm sorry, Me and You on Vacation, or whatever the
Mm.
UK title is. But I had a very specific thing in mind when I recorded that book, and it helped change the way that I do performance from that point forward. So that's an important one to me. Um, I mean, I'm very lucky. It's an embarrassment of riches, the quality of the books that I get. And so therefore, in certain ways, every performance has been very memorable for me.
Definitely. And I mean, just going back to the Emily Henry, did you get to go to the premiere for
I
that film?
did. I
It's
went to the
such a
premiere.
good
So
film.
part of that was that had nothing to do with being an audiobook narrator. That had to do with the same production company and studio did My Oxford Year. And it was
Right.
at the My Oxford Year premiere, which when you're the author, it's very unpleasant. Like it's just you know. And I went up to the producer and I was like, okay, enough of this. What I really want to do is be at the People We Meet on Vacation premiere. And so they invited me, and so I was able to be there. Mainly I went for Emily, just to kind of like be backup and be like, if you need to go into a bathroom and breathe into a brown paper bag at any point,
Oh,
I will do that with
yeah.
you. um and it ended up just being so fun, and she was great, she was fine.
Yeah.
And so, but that is a book that is so deeply a part of me, that it was like watching my kid graduate high school or something.
Oh, they're just such good books, though, aren't they?
They're
They're just so
so good.
feel good books that they're just, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
So, if you could collaborate with any author or narrator you haven't worked with yet,
Ooh.
who would you pick potentially?
Oh man, there a lot. Um, in the narrator space, I would really like to do something with Richard Armitage. We have not managed to connect on anything, and I feel that's a waste personally. I would really
Definitely.
like to do that. Um, there's Marin Ireland is someone who we've never been on the same book, and that's sad to me. Um, I am for authors. I mean, getting to do the Cormac McCarthy books, his last two were huge for me. I had no connection with him because he was already quite ill at that point. And he's a bit of a recluse anyway, so um, I Stephen King.
Yes.
Um, there's also some classics that I would love to do. Um, yeah, I have a little personal list. There's some romance novelists that like iconic old school romance novelists that I'd love to work for.
Definitely. So, if you could give any advice to any aspiring audiobook narrators looking to break into the industry, what would you sort of suggest?
My problem with answering this question is that I came into the industry at such a different time. There was not a clear path into it. We all fell backwards into this job. And so it's very hard for me to know what to tell people. I will say this. Obviously, the industry is being affected by AI and synthetic voice, and that's just going to make it harder to get into because the books that were where narrators kind of cut their teeth, indie authors, small presses, things like that. A lot of that work has gone to AI. So it's there are pathways now. It just requires a lot more lift than it did when I was starting. A lot of people have to kind of have a home studio to begin with before you even know if this is going to be a viable career. Um, they have more classes and training than they used to. There's networks, groups that help answer these questions and can kind of shepherd you. So it's more of a buy-in than it ever was. And I do worry about the sustainability of this, in that I'm not sure how much work is going to be there in the future. So it's not to say I don't want to scare people, but it's a very difficult, very hard job. And I think one of those, you know, the twist of it, the catch 22 is if you want to do it full time, it means you're doing a lot of work. It's the 70 books a year that I used to do. And as I watch again, not having the royalties or not having any back end, the money is just not great. It's just not.
Mm.
And so I feel like first and foremost, I just tell people, do you really love it? Because a lot of people will say, I read to my kids and I love doing that, or people say I have a great voice. And I'm like, that's all good. But why don't you go into a closet for 8 hours a day by yourself and read a book and do 100 pages a day and see how much you really like it. It's incredibly isolating. It's, you have to be just one of those weirdos like me who likes to just talk to herself all day.
Oh, bless. I think we've got time for just one more question, if that's okay. So, are there any upcoming projects that you're really excited about that you're able to share with us?
Yeah, I so a couple of things have come out recently. One is the new Frida McFadden novel, Dear Debbie, which I do part of. One is a novel called Escape by a debut novelist, Stephen Fishback, who it's set in reality TV, and so it's kind of a behind the scenes glimpse into how the sausage gets made. And he was a reality TV contestant, and so he knows what he's writing about. It's a great book. And Blade by Wendy Walker just came out, which is a kind of mystery thriller set in the figure skating world. That's a lot of fun. And we at Audiobury just came out with a really wonderful historical fiction piece that reminds me a lot of Kristin Hanna called The Immigrant's Wife. So that's available wherever you get your audiobooks. If you get it directly through Audiobury, then there's a bonus interview at the end with the author. But in your program, it should be. We should actually make sure that all of Audiobury titles are going into
Yeah.
listening books. Let's
Yeah.
double
So
up on
gross.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's been great books recently, really, really good, and so and a few more coming this spring that I probably can't talk about yet, but there's always something in the hopper.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you
Thank you,
everyone for
everyone.
your
Thanks for
questions.
showing up. Yeah, thanks for the
Yeah,
questions. Happy listening.
yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time, everybody. So it'll be next month, I think, our next Q&A. But again, thank you so much for Julia for spending your time with us.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.